Celtic. Well, now, we know about those migrations because Roman writers and Greek writers describe them, and they give us a view, the classical view, of the Celts, these people who attacked them from the north. Strabo, for example, says the Celts were war mad. They were people who loved to have feasts, were boasting in their feasts, would say, tomorrow I'm going to lead a raid, and everyone would put up their hands and say, I'm going to join you, and they would go off and lead a raid. They were impetuous people. Celts were war mad, but not of evil character, says Strabo. So there is that concept. They are an enemy to be fought. And here is an image of that. It's terracotta of about the 4th century from Italy, and it shows Celts raiding and running off with their plunder, raiding probably a temple. And one of the Celts you see over here is naked, wearing a torque around his neck. And this is another view that the classical world had of the Celts. Often they went naked into battle, we're told, unarmed except for the sacred torque around their neck, which they assumed would keep them safe. And here they are running off with their plunder from probably a Roman temple or an Etruscan temple somewhere in the north. So to a Roman, that was what the Celts were like. Now let's just look at what the archaeology and the armaments of the Celts were. Here are some lateen swords, fine iron swords in bronze, in leather sheaths with decorated bronze strengthening to the sheaths, usually decorated in this period in a flamboyant form of vegetal art, these lovely flowing scrolls and so on. And there you see a number of swords all bent and buckled. Now, this is what Polybius, a Greek writer, but writing in the Roman world, says about the Gaulish sword. The Gaulish sword is only good for a cut and not a thrust. From the way their swords are made, only the first cut takes any effect. After this, they at once assume the shape of a stridule, being so much bent lengthwise and sideways that unless men are given leave to rest and put them on the ground and set them straight with their foot, the second blow is quite ineffective. Now, there you might think is a wonderful confirmation of Polybius. There are the buckled swords. Polybius is right. Not so. Those swords are, Celtic swords are very good. They don't buckle like that. These swords are deliberately bent for ritual deposition. And Polybius presumably saw swords like that and wondered why they were buckled and made up a story about them. So we've got to be careful about the classical interpretation of the archaeological evidence. The spears were one of the other weapons of aggression which these warlike Celts had. Diodorus is quite impressed by Celtic spears. He says, some have breaks along their entire length, so that the blow not only cuts, but also tears the flesh, and recovery of the spear rips the wound open. Romans' view of warfare and the quality of weapons. These are a couple of Celtic spears, very fine ones, elegant shape. These don't have notches along their edges. This one is beautiful. It comes from the Thames, decorated with bronze curvilinear design. So the Romans knew a lot about these spears. They were on the receiving end of them. And indeed, some of the spears that we do find do have notches in them. And those notches would have been very effective for making the wound open and bleed so that one lost strength wherever one was wounded. They also had other weapons. They had slings. Sling stones were quite important. In the hill fort that Jamie mentioned that we excavated at Danebury, we found lots of sling stones, pebbles, which were stockpiled, ready to defend the entrance to the hill fort. Sling, very, very effective weapon. In fact, the excavators during Danebury decided to become effective slingers and they made their own slings out of the excavation string. They used the sling stones, and during lunch breaks they practiced slinging. It was very, very dangerous to go into the hill fort during that stage. And they found that they could easily, you sling this way, and you can let go. And if you would let go at the right moment, they could hit a tree, a narrow tree, at about 30 or 40 feet quite easily after a little bit of experience. So the sling, very effective, very cheap. Anyone could have a sling. Anyone could make one. They also sometimes use bows and arrows as well, but not very often. Now, for defense, body armor, they used shields. One of the Roman writers talks about their shields being man-sized. That is, they're not little round things. They're good body protection. You would have it hanging on your left arm, and it would protect you from the chin down to the knees. And there is a sculpture in southern France of a Celt holding a typical Celtic shield, probably made from wood with the central umbo, that feature there, which protects the hand, that central umbo made of metal. But just show how simple they can be, there are actual wooden shields there from a ship, a votive ship which was put into a bog in Denmark, a place called Hjort Spring. And it's made, you see, from a single plank of wood. It's a very easy thing to make, a shield like that. And behind that umbo would be the hand grip. And if you use light wood, you could fend off an attacker very effectively. One of the shields or rather the remains of one of the shields that I excavated on one of the Channel Islands, which is just off the British coast, between Britain and France, was made of layers of wood and faced back and front with leather, a sort of plywood effect. Very effective, and if you hit it with a sword, the sword would simply bounce off. So a very effective form of body defense. And helmets, a selection of Celtic helmets. Diodorus again. On their heads, they wear bronze helmets, which possess projecting figures, lending the appearance of enormous stature to the wearer. In some cases, horns form one part with the helmet, while in other cases, it is the four parts of birds or quadrupeds. Now, there is the classic helmet with horns on it. The idea to make you look tall, make you look fierce. That's the only horned helmet we know, but it comes from the River Thames near Waterloo Bridge. It was dredged up. And every reconstruction in every school book wears that particular helmet, although it's the only one we've got. And that's a helmet from Italy, that's from the northern Britain. See, it's rather like a baseball cap, and it's worn like a baseball cap turned round, with that being the neck guard there. And it had side pieces rather like these, hanging down to protect the cheeks. And many of them had visors on the front to deflect any glancing blow from a sword. So very effective indeed. But the four parts of birds and quadrupeds sounds rather silly. But some of the helmets, like this one, have little holes on the top. And we have small bronze models of boars, which were a symbol of protection for the Celts. And some of these helmets had boars on them, and that one would have had. So that's what Diodorus is talking about. But the four parts of birds, well, here is the classic helmet with a bird on it from Romania, from Transylvania, right in the center of the Carpathian Mountains. And this is an amazing helmet. You see the typical Celtic helmet here with this wonderful bird on it with, it's a raven or a bird of prey of some sort, with red glassy eyes that stare at you. And the really neat thing about this is that the wings are hinged, so that if you're wearing this and running at your opponent, the wings would actually flap. But one would hope the helmet wouldn't take off, but it would flap. And imagine the effect of that, a great hairy warrior running at you with his helmet flapping. And there you see, also from Romania, someone wearing one of these helmets with a bird perched on it. Now, to someone like Diodorus, he could say this. It would be quite interesting. It would sketch out the Celts to his reader as being someone curious, not like us, as it were. But in fact, it's terribly important because in Celtic mythology, the raven was often the form in which certain of the gods turn themselves in a shape-shifting mode to be the people who swept down and grabbed people and carried them off. The end of your life would be presaged by a bird, the vision of a bird coming down and sweeping you in its claws, taking you away. So wearing this on your helmet and going into battle and facing your enemy would see the idea of the great bird sweeping down on him, ready to grab hold of him. His days would be numbered. So it would have a tremendous psychological effect. Now, the other elements of battle were fascinating. The carnix, the Celtic war trumpet, which you see here in various forms. There are actual war trumpets, bits of them found from Britain, the long tube and the mouth in the form of a boar's head, the boar again being the symbol of strength. Here on a cauldron found in Denmark are 3 horn blowers, and you see again the animal's head, and here's just an artist's reconstruction. But one of the classical writers again talks about how blowing into the horns produces a raucous sound, which he says suits the tumult of war. And he goes on to say that when this noise is blowing and when the warriors are shouting and screaming, it seems as though the whole land has taken up the great war cry. Psychologically, of course, this completely understandable. The use of noise in warfare is very well known. One thinks of one of my favourite films, Apocalypse Now, and the helicopter gunships going down and blaring out the Ride of the Valkyries. Great noise to distract and to discourage. When we have the occasional prison riot in Britain, as we do from time to time, noise, particularly loud rock music, is used to destabilize the rioters. Noise is very, very important in warfare. So we can begin to understand how the Celts used all this. The other item in warfare, which was very important indeed, was the chariot. We have here a chariot burial, a human buried with his 2-wheeled chariot. This is from northern England, and you can see the iron tires of the wheels here, and even the wooden spokes showing. So a 2-wheeled chariot, and here in the archaeological record, a lot of material that decked out the horse, or the horse bit, and the linchpin which kept the wheels on the hub, and various glossy, shiny trappings to put on the reins to make it shine and glitter. So again, display, art being used in the context of warfare. We know we've got a remarkable description of the Celtic chariot in war. There is a reconstruction of a chariot, very much a simple platform. And it's Julius Caesar who attacks Britain in 55 and 54 BC, and he comes up against Celtic chariots for the first time. And he gives a description of this. Now, Caesar is impressed by this. And I'm just going to read you this because it's quite an accurate description of how you could use these. In chariot fighting, he says, the Britons begin by driving all over the field and hurling their javelins, and generally the terror inspired by the horses and the noise of the wheels are sufficient to throw their opponent's ranks into disorder. Noise again. Then, after making their way between the squadrons of their own cavalry, they jump down from the chariots and engage on foot. In the meantime, their charioteers retire a short distance from the battle and place the chariots in such a position that their masters, if hard pressed by numbers, have an easy means to retreat to their own lines. Thus, they combine the mobility of cavalry with the staying power of infantry. And by daily training and practice, they attain such proficiency that even on a steep incline, they are able to control the horses at full gallop and to check and turn them in a moment. They can run along the chariot pole, stand on the yoke, and get back into the chariot as quick as lightning. Now, there is a practiced general being very impressed by the method of warfare with which he was unfamiliar, which the Celts used. Combine the staying power of infantry with the mobility of cavalry. There's the mind of a tactician and a military man seeing the advantage of all this. So there are some sort of sketches of Celtic warfare through archaeological material, real archaeological material, and through the classical writers, how they perceived the Celts. We know that warfare changed over time, that to begin with, the type of warfare was very much the warfare of heroes, that in societies, warfare was damaging, dangerous, and on the whole, societies tried to avoid it, although they were very aggressive. And quite often this aggression was modulated, as it were, through single combat, when the heroes come out and they yell abuse at each other, and the heroes then fight in full view of their own people. And then when one lot of heroes have fought, another lot come out, and so on. So it's ritualized aggression fought through heroes. That's how it was to begin with. But as the Celtic peoples came into closer and closer contact with Roman and Greek armies, they had to modify their fighting to suit their classical enemies. So it becomes more all-out warfare.